Dean Martin hadn't visited anyone on their deathbed in years. But when he finally stepped into Sammy Davis Jr.'s hospital room, the words he spoke made Sammy cry tears of joy in his final moments. It was May 14, 1990, and Sammy Davis Jr. was dying. The throat cancer that had been attacking his voice box for months was winning. In his private room at Cedars-Sinai, Sammy lay surrounded by machines, his once unshakable energy slipping away with every labored breath. The voice that had electrified audiences around the world had been reduced to little more than a whisper. For weeks, Hollywood royalty had streamed in to say goodbye. Frank Sinatra visited almost daily, sitting by Sammy's bed, holding his hand, telling old stories just to make him smile. Elizabeth Taylor sent flowers. Liza Minnelli had sung softly at his bedside. The entertainment world was losing one of its brightest stars, and the people who loved him felt the clock ticking. But there was one person Sammy desperately wanted to see. One absence that hurt more than the cancer destroying his body. Dean Martin hadn't come. And with each passing day, it seemed more likely he never would. Dean had always been different from the rest of the Rat Pack when emotions were involved. Frank was fiery and dramatic. Sammy was open, affectionate, unafraid of vulnerability. Dean, on the other hand, locked everything away. He hated hospitals, avoided funerals, and refused goodbyes when he knew they would be final. Dean doesn't do deathbeds, Frank had told Sammy's wife, Altovise, when she asked whether Dean might visit. It's not that he doesn't care. He does. He can't handle this kind of thing. But Sammy had been hoping the way you hope for something that sits in your heart for decades. Because Dean Martin wasn't just a friend. He was family. They had shared stages, jokes, dreams, and the wild, glittering nights of Las Vegas when the Rat Pack ruled everything. They had lived through an era where every show felt like magic and every moment felt bigger than life. Sammy remembered the early days, when he wasn't welcome in the same hotels where Dean and Frank stayed. Dean never made speeches, never raised a fist, never announced what he was doing. Instead, he quietly made sure every contract required equal treatment for every member of the group. Dean never boasted about standing up for Sammy. He just did it. "Dean's got your back," Frank used to say. "He just doesn't talk about it." Now, as Sammy lay dying, the memories came in waves. The late-night conversations in hotel suites. The practical jokes. The way Dean would glance over at him mid-performance, and both would break into uncontrollable laughter for reasons no one else could understand. But Dean still hadn't come. And Sammy began to accept he might never see his friend again. On the morning of May 14th, Sammy was having one of his hardest days. The pain medication blurred the world around him, pulling him in and out of consciousness. When he was awake, breathing felt like trying to lift a weight he couldn't carry. Altovise sat beside him, reading letters from fans across the world. "Here's one from a little girl in Ohio," she said softly. "She says you taught her she could be anything she wants to be." Sammy managed a faint smile. Even at the end, knowing he had touched someone's life brought him comfort. Around 2 p.m., there was a soft knock at the door. Altovise looked up, expecting a nurse or another visitor. Instead, Dean Martin stepped quietly into the room. He looked older than Sammy remembered, more fragile, more worn by grief. The death of his son Dean Paul 3 years earlier had carved something deep into him. His trademark swagger had faded into a careful, hesitant shuffle. Altovise gasped. She hadn't expected this. Not now. Dean moved toward the bed slowly, taking in the sight of his friend. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Sammy opened his eyes. They struggled to focus, but when they found Dean's face, they softened. "Dino," he whispered, barely audible. "Hey, Smokey," Dean replied, using the nickname he'd given Sammy decades earlier. "You look terrible." Sammy tried to laugh, which immediately turned into a coughing fit. But through the pain, his eyes shone, alive with joy he hadn't felt in weeks. Dean pulled a chair close and sat beside him. For several seconds, they simply looked at each other. 30 years of friendship passed between them in silence. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Sammy managed. Dean lowered his gaze. "I wasn't sure I would, either. I'm not good at this stuff, Sam. You know that." "You're here now," Sammy said. "That's what matters." Dean reached into his jacket pocket, his hand trembling slightly, and pulled out something that made Sammy's eyes instantly fill with tears. It was a photograph from 1960, the 5 members of the Rat Pack on stage at the Copa Room in Las Vegas. Young, confident, arms around each other, laughing at a joke none of them could remember now. They looked invincible. "I found this in my desk," Dean said, holding the photo where Sammy could see. "I've been carrying it around for weeks, trying to work up the courage to come here." Sammy stared at the photograph, breathing shallowly, remembering the night it was taken. It had been during the filming of Ocean's 11. They'd just finished a show that hit every note, every laugh, every moment perfectly. Back then, the world felt wide open. Every dream felt possible. "We were something, weren't we?" Sammy whispered. "We were everything," Dean replied. "The best there ever was." Altovise recognized the moment for what it was, private, sacred, and quietly slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. Dean shifted closer to the bed. His voice lowered. "Sam, I need to tell you something. A few things, actually. Stuff I should have said a long time ago." Sammy nodded, though the effort drained him. Dean took a breath. "I was never good with words like frank. I couldn't make speeches or tell people how I felt. But you were more than a friend to me. You were the heart of everything we did." Sammy blinked, tears forming again. He had spent decades hoping to hear something like this from Dean, even once. Dean's voice wavered. "When we first started performing together, I watched how you handled all the garbage they threw at you. The places that wouldn't let you stay. The people who said things no one should ever have to hear. You never let it make you bitter. You never let it change who you were." Sammy's tears finally spilled. Dean wasn't a man who spoke this openly. Hearing these words now, at the very end, was overwhelming. "You taught me what real class looked like," Dean said softly. Sammy tried to respond, but emotion choked the words in his throat. Dean leaned back, gathering himself, then continued. "You remember that night in Miami? When they tried to make you use the service entrance?" Dean shook his head slowly. "I wanted to fight the whole damn hotel. But you just smiled and said, 'Let's show them how it's done.'" Sammy managed a weak laugh through the tears. He remembered. It had been 1961, and even at the height of the Rat Pack's fame, some venues still clung to their discriminatory rules. Sammy chose dignity over confrontation, talent over fists. "Let's be so good they can't ignore us," Dean recited. "And you were right. You were always right." He swallowed hard. "I was proud to stand beside you every night we ever walked onto a stage." Dean hesitated, his face tightening as if he were wrestling with something deeper. "I know I wasn't always there when you needed someone. I know I could have spoken up more. Done more." He paused. "Truth is, I was a coward sometimes, Sam." Sammy lifted a trembling hand and placed it on Dean's. "You were there when it mattered," he whispered. "Dino, you always had my back." Dean squeezed his hand gently, the smallest smile crossing his face. Then his expression shifted again, more serious, almost haunted. "There's something else I've never told anyone," he said quietly. "You saved my life once." Sammy looked confused. "Not literally," Dean clarified. "But you saved who I was." He leaned forward. It was 1963, after the whole Kennedy mess, when everything got complicated with Frank, with the politics, with the pressure. Dean shook his head slowly. I was done, Sam. I was ready to quit. Walk away from the business, the pack, everything. I thought the magic was gone. Sammy's eyes softened with recognition. Dean nodded. Yeah. You remember. He took a breath, steadying himself. I called you that night. I was drunk, feeling sorry for myself, telling you I was finished with show business. And you came over to my house at 3 in the morning. You sat with me until sunrise. The memory washed over both of them, heavy, warm, bittersweet. You told me the music mattered more than the politics, that what we did on stage was pure. You said friendship was bigger than the nonsense that was pulling everyone apart. Dean's voice dropped to a whisper. You saved our friendship that night, Sam. He paused. You saved me. The room fell silent. Both men cried softly, not from pain, but from the weight of truths carried for far too long. Dean wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to regain his composure. But the vulnerability in his voice lingered, raw and unguarded. Sam, he said quietly, I have to ask you for one more favor. Sammy's breathing was shallow, but he managed the smallest smile. Anything, Dino. Dean hesitated before speaking again, as if the words were fragile. When you get where you're going, keep an eye out for Dean Paul. He's probably lost up there, and he could use a friend. Sammy's face softened. The pain, the exhaustion, all of it seemed to pause for a moment. I'll find him, he whispered. I'll take care of him. Dean nodded, swallowing hard. Grief still lived inside him, the kind that never went away, only quieted until stirred. Then something happened Sammy had never experienced in all the years they'd known each other. Dean leaned down and gently kissed his forehead. I love you, Smokey, he said. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. You were the best friend a guy could have. Sammy's tears returned. He reached for Dean's hand, gripping it with what little strength he had left. I love you too, Dino. Thank you for coming. A pause. Thank you for everything. Dean stayed another hour, sharing memories, laughing softly at old stories, sitting in long stretches of silence that felt full rather than empty. They didn't need words anymore, not after everything said that afternoon. Eventually, Dean stood. Both men knew what this moment meant. Goodbye. Dean paused in the doorway, looking back at the man who had shared decades of his life. The stages, the successes, the battles, the joy. Hey, Sam, he said, forcing a half-smile. Next time I see you, you better be ready to sing. I've got some new material I want to try out. Sammy laughed, a thin but genuine sound. I'll be ready, partner. Save me the good songs. Dean nodded once, firmly, and walked out. It was the last time they ever saw each other. 2 days later, on May 16, 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away. His final hours were peaceful. Those closest to him noticed something different after Dean's visit. The fear that had lingered for weeks had lifted. He had received the blessing, the closure, the love he'd waited decades to hear. Dean Martin attended Sammy's funeral. It was one of the rare times, especially in his later years, that he showed up publicly for such an occasion. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence was enough, a quiet, stoic tribute to the friend who meant more to him than he ever said aloud. Years later, when people asked Dean about that final visit, he offered only a simple answer. We said what needed to be said. But the part most people never knew, the part that revealed the depth of their bond, came from the photograph Dean brought to the hospital that day. After Sammy died, the nurses found it on his nightstand, the 5 Rat Pack members in their prime, arms around one another, laughing like nothing bad could ever touch them. On the back, in Dean's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "For Smokey, the best there ever was. Love, Dino." That photograph now sits in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a testament to a friendship that survived fame, distance, silence, grief, and finally, death. A friendship defined by loyalty, by unspoken understanding, and by the rare kind of love two men of their era didn't know how to express aloud until the very end. In the end, the most important words they ever shared were the ones they spent a lifetime avoiding, and finally spoke when it mattered most. If this story of friendship and final farewells moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the importance of saying what matters while there's still time. Have you ever had to say goodbye to someone who changed your life? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to check out our other videos about the bonds that define us. If this story of friendship and final farewells moved you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. Share this with someone who might need a reminder about the importance of saying what matters while there's still time. Have you ever had to say goodbye to someone who changed your life? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And when you're ready, explore our other videos about the bonds that shape us, guide us, and stay with us long after the spotlight fades.